Katrina, and it is time to wrap up everything that I read in January. This month I read a total of 7 different books, but kind of 8 because I reread one of those within the same month. I did only have one 5-star read, but my lowest rating this month was 3 stars, so that's the upper end of the rating scale. It was a pretty good month. And let's start out this wrap up by checking in with what my TBR was and see how we did on that. So I read everything I was hoping to read this month, which is always a great feeling. And now let's move into the reviews. Like usual, I'm starting out at the lower end of my ratings. The first book I want to show you is the graphic novel Here by Richard McGuire. This graphic novel shows you one spot in a room in every page of the book. It's just that one spot. And the story jumps backwards and forwards in time, so you get to see what it was in the past and what it will be in the future. And I adore that concept. I frequently kind of think along those lines. If I'm just driving down the road, I think, what is this area going to look like in the future, or what did it look like in the past? And so all the stars for the concept and for the way in which he pulled off these different windows of time. However, I did end up rating it only 3 stars. This graphic novel did exactly what it said it was going to do, so really my rating is just based on my personal enjoyment. I felt like some of the panels were leading you up to finding out how these different families and all these different years and generations, how they were tied together, and then at the last minute it just ended and it wasn't there. I know it's not a story that's based on plot. There isn't a plot here. It's more of just like a slice of life. So if that's something that you're really interested in, then I think that you will like this one. Next, I read A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray, which is book number 1 in the GEMMA DOYLE trilogy. This series follows the main character, Gemma Doyle, as she is shipped off to an England boarding school, and she finds herself wrapped up in this magical secret society. And there's this whole thing about the generation before them used this magic and got in trouble and burned the school down, and now they are trying to kind of restore that secret circle. I love the atmosphere of the boarding school, and I love the concept that even regular people in this world could do magic and could enter this magical world, but Gemma just had a particularly strong gift, more of an affinity for magic. It didn't feel particularly dark or occult to me, but it's not a Harry Potter Hogwarts type pop culture type magic, so I can definitely see that this magic system might be a turnoff for some. I really enjoyed it. This is a very slow-paced plot. It's very character-centric. A bonus about it is that there's great friendships. Another great strength of this book is that there's no romance. There is a male character that Gemma kind of has dreams about, very romantic dreams about, but there's not actually a developed romance or relationship there, so that's really interesting about this. Since it's a gothic historical novel, you would assume it'd be pretty romance heavy, but it's actually not. Another really interesting thing about it is that one of the main characters has epilepsy, which is something I've never seen covered in a book. My overall rating kind of wavers between a 3.5 stars and a 4 stars. I guess it wasn't really what I was expecting at all, but I did really enjoy it, and I want to finish out this series. Next, I read Passenger by Alexandra Bracken. This is a YA time travel story. It's also very heavily romantic, and it has a very heavy historical feel because of the traveling back in time. It's a dual perspective narration, so we have 2 main characters. We have Nicholas, who actually is an African-American character, so this is a diverse book, and Nicholas is a time traveler. Then we have our other main character, Etta, who is living in New York City in present day. She has no idea that time travel is even a thing, and one day she is basically captured and sucked through a time portal and ends up in Nicholas's time, and she's told she has to go on a hunt across time to find this ancient artifact, and of course Etta is the only one that can find it. So she and Nicholas go on this time traveling adventure. This is actually the first book by Alexandra Bracken that I've ever read, and I had such a hard time getting into the writing. I just couldn't get into it. The entire first half of the book, I really struggled with reading this. She has a few very beautiful turns of phrase, but she spent so much time describing everything except for the plot. I felt like we were kept in the dark with what the actual plot was, and the plot didn't even show up until halfway through, so I did not enjoy the first half of this book at all. I actually considered DNFing it, and this is the book that is the reason why I have such trouble DNFing books, because once I picked it back up and got to that second half, I loved it. I loved everything about the second half of this book, and this is that example of I can't DNF books because what if it gets better? Because this one did get better, and I really am obsessed with it now. I really did like it. I loved the romance between these characters. There was a lot of chemistry, and I liked the way that it was written. It is a bit insta-lovey, but I felt like in this situation where they were thrown together and just outside of their own normal, natural timelines, I thought that it was kind of natural that they would lean on each other and depend on each other. A bonus for this is that there's no love triangle in this story. I also just loved the travel and the atmosphere. All that time she spends on descriptions really worked when you were in these international locations. I think we went to like 7 or 8 different places around the world, and I really thought that I was there because the descriptions really worked at that point. I ended up really liking it. I gave it 4 stars. It was on the verge of being a DNF, ended up at 4 stars. That's pretty impressive. The next books I read are part of a series, so I'm going to talk about them together even though they have different ratings. I read the 2nd and 3rd book in the Mara Dyer trilogy by Michelle Hodkin. Book number 2 is The Evolution of Mara Dyer, and book number 3 is The Retribution of Mara Dyer. This series is about a girl who has been in an accident and she can't remember what happened to her, and she starts seeing her friends everywhere, but her friends supposedly died in that accident. So the main question of this series is what actually happened, and is there a paranormal thing going on here, or is it mental illness? I read the first book in this series, The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer, back in October, and I reviewed it in my October wrap-up, so I'll put a link to that down below in case you want a refresher on what my opinion on that book was. But I basically felt the same about The Evolution as I did about the first book. I felt like it was a bit too confusing. I felt like it was very angsty, but the one thing that I did really like about this were the scenes where Mara's brother Daniel were in them, because he lent this meta narration to the story where he was commenting on what was happening in the actual book by commenting on a fictional story within the story. So I really liked that. I thought it was really clever, but I ended up giving it only a 3-star rating. Now, the 3rd book, The Retribution of Mara Dyer, I know everyone, the general consensus is that they don't like this, but we get a clear answer, and I think the problem here is that it breaks with the tone of the first 2 books, and so if you wanted more of those first 2 books, this one could potentially not live up to what you were wanting. But I had such low expectations, and I ended up loving what the author did. And the thing is, I finished this series weeks ago, and I still am peeling back more layers of the story. Now that I know how it ended, I can look at things that happened in books 1 and 2 and think she had that planned all along. And it has given me basically endless food for thought. I felt like there was a very strong literary value in this 3rd book, so I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I do have a full series review up, and I will link that down below. I talk much more in depth, and I include some spoilers and discussion if you want to hear like in-depth thoughts about especially book 3. I'll link that down below so you can check it out. But loved it! The next thing I read this month was The Girl at Midnight by Melissa Gray. This is a debut novel, and it is an urban fantasy. There's a race of bird people and there's a race of dragon people who have been locked in an ongoing war for years upon years, and both of them are wanting to track down this ancient mythical creature called the Firebird, because whoever finds it will have the power to end the war. Our main character, Echo, is a human, and she is an ally with one of the sides. I do have a video up called 4 Reasons Why You Should Read The Girl at Midnight, but in a nutshell, this is a heist story featuring a group of misfit characters that are traveling around the world following clues to track down this mythical creature. And I find that this is a sorely underrated book. I really liked it. I thought it did some things very well. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. The main character was an amazingly capable character who actually dealt with her emotions and these crazy things that are going on because she's thrust into a war. In terms of the setting of this book, again, we kind of travel around the world, and I really liked the plot of the story because it's this adventure following clues type story. I really like that. This is the first book in a series, so I can't wait to see where it goes. And the final thing that I have read this month is Simon versus a Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. This is a story about a gay young man in high school named Simon, and he is not out. but he is having an email relationship with another boy at his school who is also not out. So they don't know each other's identities because they don't want to come out yet. Simon accidentally leaves his email up at school one day, and one of his classmates sees it and blackmails him by threatening to out him if Simon doesn't do something to help this guy. I love the way that Simon processed his emotions about this person, and also about should he come out, when should he do it, how can he do it on his own terms. I loved the romance. I loved that plot of this secret identity and not knowing who it is, and loving that person for who they are instead of what they look like. And there's this edge to it that reads like a mystery, because the whole time you're reading these emails you're trying to figure out who is this person, because they go to school with Simon. Who is it? Is it someone that we know or someone that we haven't met yet? And another amazing thing about this book is that there's actual adult involvement. We have adult characters, parents and teachers, who are actually involved with the teenagers in this story in a very healthy way. I love that they were present in a YA story. There's also some racial diversity in this book among the group of friends, and there were some just really amazing messages in this book. It was nothing new, it's nothing that we don't know, but this book shines light on some very important issues such as race and orientation. So I just really enjoyed this book. As soon as I finished reading it, I turned around and picked the book up and read it from page 1 again. I've said this before, but I love it so much that I read this from the library and immediately bought my own copy because I needed to own this book. I need to have it in my life permanently. I love this book. I love it so much. I do have a video up if you want to hear 6 reasons why I think you might want to give this one a try. These are all the books I read in January and what I thought of them. Definitely let me know down below what you read this month and what your favorite read of the month was. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the comments. Bye!